Good morning, members. I call this Ways and Means public budget hearing to order. It's 10:05 a.m. Um, we do have a quorum, and so pursuant to the OGA, the agenda has been passed out. We have this morning Department of Lands and Natural Resources. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for bringing your staff here to present your case. I believe uh, you might be the second highest cuts as far as the agency is concerned. So we would like to hear your presentation. With that, can I get a motion to adopt today's agenda? There has been a motion, has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Ayes have it. I guess everybody knows his name. With that, I'd like to introduce the members of the committee. To my left, we have my vice chair, Representative Bloss Atto. And to my right, we have members, Vice Speaker Joe Camacho. To my left at the floor, we have Representative Chairwoman Julie Ogo. And it's now Chair and Member Representative John Paul Sablan. We have to his left, we have also Chairman Representative Angelo Camacho, and to his left, we have Representative and Member Roman Beneventi, and to his left, we have a member and Chairman Manny Castro, and to the far right, we have our honorary member, Representative Danita Yangtamay, which we are working on your membership. So please bear with us. We have our legislative assistant, Ms. Claire, down in the far right, and as well as our fiscal analyst, TG, and our counsel, Joe Tyrone, and our, I guess, our IT, John Diaz. Um Thank you also, Ms. Vicky, for being present today. You may enter the chamber. And Secretary, you may also enter and bring your directors if you choose so. Thank you. And we move down to public comments. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on today's agenda? Uh, Being there's none, I'll move down to item 4, statement of the chair. And thank you, Secretary Igasomar, for being here. And I will now yield to you for your opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Body. I just wanted to introduce members of my team that came with me today. We've been at this budget numbers for a while now. Um, Over here on my right, far right, Director of Fish and Wildlife, Manny Pangilinan. Next to him is Director of Parks and Recreation, Mr. Mike Cruz. Jack Song Song, Director of Lands and uh, Registration Survey. Special Advisor Floyd Mosca. Uh, on loan to me is Admin Officer Rosemary Camacho and Director of Agriculture, Mr. Jack Ogomro. Um, as you mentioned, we don't have much of a presentation to you. We fully understand the situation our economy is in. Um, we support the governor's submission, but look to you, this auspicious body. If you have any funding available to throw at us, we'll happily take it. But we're prepared to uh, work with whatever the numbers that we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Igasomar. And with that, I mean, it's a big concern. We see the cuts and the requests. Our main issue here is there's a lot of vacant positions, and is the department planning to hire uh, and fill those positions?
We are trying to be creative in how to fill the gaps that we have by leveraging federal funds, federal grants, and we'll be circling back to this body to help us with some legislation to help us with some of the fees that we can collect to support some of the programs that we have. Um, but yeah, some of those things require legislative actions.
Thank you, Secretary. Follow up.
Just a follow-up question. Thank you, Secretary, for your answer. I think this is one thing that we've been trying to work with the various departments and agencies is to look at the enabling statute that created the Department of Lands and Natural Resources and see. I personally believe that the the secretary and their team within the department will be more versed in the functions of the department rather than us. We're only seeing what's visible and what we hear, right? So maybe that's something we can work with your department on the enabling legislation to see how. And I personally believe that you guys can be revenue generating, right? And I think what we can do is work on the enabling legislation and amend the sections or repeal and reenact certain sections, so it allows you guys to be creative in making monies for yourself, and in turn, what we can do is make sure that those monies that DLNR in this case makes will be without fiscal year limitation and shall be utilized for the department. And we can also be cognizant of the fact that down the road, when we get back to this type of discussions in the budget, that we can always rely on the honesty of the department to provide the numbers that they've collected for the department itself, and then we can work on the budget in a much smoother process with your department. So I respectfully ask the secretary and your team to pull out that enabling act that created your department, so that we can work with you guys to see how we can strengthen your ability to be able to be some sort of self-sustaining to a certain extent, but also with the assistance from this body to within the budget process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, and your team.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And just a follow up with regards to revolving fund. I only see two. I mean, this is an old report, but just the Animal Health Service Fund and Fish and Game revolving fund. Is there any other revolving fund that the department has that generates? Because the bulk of the cuts obviously is on operation, and I do notice that a lot of uh, a lot of the department I guess relies on grants. So any revolving fund that that is not here aside from the uh, animal health service fund and fish and game revolving fund.
Yes, we do have several revolving funds that are specific to each of the programs. For example, we have a revolving special funds for parks and recreation for all the park rentals and those kind of things. It goes back into uh, supporting the operations of parks and recreation, fuel and equipment, and those kind of things. Um, Agriculture has some another special account that charges for equipment usage. You know, folks come in and ask for support in using heavy equipment, and we get some funding from that. They're nominal, but they help. Fish and Wildlife has transient dog fees that we're collecting also, um, and several others. But there are certain accounts that are very specific. We can't use it for anything but the intention. For example, the Saipan Upland Mitigation Bank agreement has about 700 some thousand dollars in there, but it's set aside to manage the mitigation bank. Um, but yeah, those are some examples of fees that we're collecting. We're also looking at hopefully making some changes to the Submerged Lands Act that funnels money to public lands and then to MPLT, and then I don't know what happens to it. But it's currently under DLNR, and so we receive the check and then we remit the check back to public lands. And in conversations with the governor, he's supportive of making that change and having that funds stay at DLNR for operational uh, expenses.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And with regards to the maintenance of the I guess MARP area, does MVA still remit funds to the I guess Parks and Rec?
It's public lands, not
It's
MVA.
public. Oh, it's
But
public.
we have a very close working relationship with both MVA and public lands, pooling our resources. And as we have skilled labor at Parks and Rec, and they have needs out there that, we need to help out with tourist type things or visitors and things, we make the adjustment so we can provide that support. But yes, there is a exchange in resources and personnel
Right.
support.
Thank you for that clarification. I'll now open the floor to any member. Rep Beneventi.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, and I'm looking at this, the spreadsheet on the fish and wildlife, for example. I'm looking at it in the enforcement section, basically. Uh, we have so many vacancies with regards to the enforcement, and especially like the conservation officers. I don't know how much. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Geez, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's quite a number of COs that needs to be filled in as far as the vacancy is concerned. Um, it's very, it's very uh, open in the community that the CO do not have enough enforcement. I mean, the fish and wildlife do not have enough enforcement. So not only and it's showing to all the fishermen that are going out and buying permits and whatnot. Um, they still don't get checked with the enforcement. So it's showing that they are short-handed as far as the operation is concerned. And I'm just trying to figure out, because we know that the situation of the fundings, but how can we, how can you try to get money from Jack to give it to Jill? I mean to say, how can we try to figure out how to augment something that could be, because if we stimulate this the enforcement and hire the enforcement officers, we could probably generate more income as far as permitting and citations and whatnot. So basically, that's one area. Another thing too that I like to share with as far as the natural resources and the fish and wildlife is that, and this is just a concern that I aired this out yesterday during the public works meeting, that the governor came out on the news and saying that he's establishing a one-stop permitting process for the businesses. Uh, Unfortunately, I heard that it's not like the different entities are not correlating together and not really working together as far as trying to make these things happen. And this thing is, putting developments and even homesteads and stuff like that in the setback. So I'm just I'm just concerned on how you can mitigate to try to you know make sure that this thing goes on and continues because it is a challenge. Only last week I saw some issues down by just down here on the road that it's a concern, but it's within the parameters of the law as far as fish and wildlife is concerned. So those are the things that we have to try to figure out how can we come to amicable solutions in this area. And another thing too, like I'm just looking at the Lanson survey. I come around to Lanson survey sometimes and I bother these guys for their expertise and whatnot. But I noticed they don't even have, on the old others, they don't even have, not even for fuel for their, you know, to use on to perform their duties and responsibilities. So it's it's something that we have to. It's a small issues that could bring up a bigger problem. So that's why I'm just airing these things out just to share with you guys and see how we can come about with the secretary. No offense as far as trying to needle on anything. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to work with, have this body work with you guys so we can work things out together. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you?
Representative Roman, you did you require a response or
Well, if the secretary would or the what you call the directors are able to respond, then the response would be welcome.
As it relates to the permitting concerns, whenever we begin something new, there's sometimes you got to take some baby steps and there's a learning curve. So we're working through those things at the moment. Um, Funding has always been an issue, a challenge, and I recognize, some of our first line responders take the majority of um the pie, which makes sense, life saving, those health and those kind of things. And so we try to be creative in coming up with other ways to cover the cost of doing business, which might include phone call to the governor or a visit to you, good folks here, to help with that kind of support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I yield again for your information.
thank you, Representative? See, Vice Speaker, then Rep. Uh, John Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Secretary, and to your team, your directors, Ms. Vicky Gomez, and Angel. I just have a quick question. You did state earlier that you did support the governor's proposal for fiscal year 2024, but I'm kind of noticing that under Parks and Recreation, there's no adjustment in the number of personnel, but there's a significant reduction in personnel salaries. Is there Have you met with the governor to discuss this by chance?
We have some arrangements with public lands to provide funding support for Parks and Rec, because we cover a huge area that includes a lot of the places that public land owns. Uh, Marpi area, for example, and those kind of things. And so there's some funding support from to cover the shortfalls.
Oh, okay, so you're saying that DPL is helping to subsidize some of that reduction in salaries.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Speaker, Representative Sablan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Secretary, and to your team. Um, I noticed that your department's budget requests for fiscal year 2024 versus the governor's proposal for fiscal 24, there is a huge variance in the tune of 4.2 million. But uh, the the main concern here is the revised budget of fiscal year 2023 versus the governor's proposal. There is a decrease of 158,000. So you were mentioning earlier that your department do collect fees and then you guys remit it to DPO, uh, and you're working on how we can create legislations so that those funds remain on your department. But can you just give us a figure of how much collected annually on those kind of fees?
That is specific to submerged lands, and to my experience, I've only had one lease that is on my table, and to the tune of 70 something $1,000 a year. But I'm sure there are others. We're just digging through the files and trying to figure out who else needs, because it's an annual lease, but it's for submerged lands.
Okay, so 70,000. So, and then you mentioned earlier also that you have several revolving funds, and that you also use that to for your operations. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And for those revolving funds, like for instance, example for the Samba credit, how much on an annually basis? I know it varies, but for instance, for last year, how much was actually collected for that revolving fund?
I cannot tell you how much a year comes in. I only have the total figure as it stands today.
For all the revolving funds, yes?
No,
Can
no,
we-
no. Just for, oh yeah, even the revolving funds.
Yeah.
But for the mitigation bank, it is sitting at 700 to.
Okay, 700 on the mitigation bank. And how flexible is this funding of 700 that can you use?
The way it was set up is that it's put into a trust account, so it creates
Interest?
interest, and the interest is used to pay for the operation and management of the mitigation bank itself.
And
So
when
I can't take that and pay Fish and Wildlife to get a car or Parks and Rec. It's specific to that.
so the interest on an annual basis is somewhere in the tune of,
Uh, I
do you have that figure?
I don't have that figure today.
Thank you. Um, that's it for me now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. Rep. Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Dilinar and staff, management staff. So my question is, and I brought this up to Secretary Igisor and see Mr. Floyd Masca regarding the fines that are imposed for illegal importation of like gaming, for example, coconut crabs, deer meat. So just for clarification, upon arrival of those illegal importations and the individual bring it in is being fined, the fundings will apply in Saipan's funding, or does Rhoda get a portion, or of that fundings for the citation or the fines?
I believe it is at the discretion of Fish and Wildlife to determine where that goes. But it's supposed to go back into operation and conservation measures.
Okay. So also my question, I know you guys shared some of the, the laws on regarding that issue. And so where does ROTA stand as far as, coming in and searching and seizing those items? Does it have to be, do they have that jurisdiction in ROTA to do that, or it has to be it has to be an import based on that?
Can you clarify what?
So what I'm trying to say is, you know, a few months ago there was an illegal importation of those coconut crabs and deer meat. So there was a question about the, the what do you call that? Seize, search and seizure.
Mhm.
And so there was a concern that, uh, like what you shared, you have that discretion to do that, right? Based on reasonable search and seizure. Now, for RODA's part, where do they come in as far as searching that before exporting it out?
Man, you wanna?
Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman. There's nothing stopping the ROTA from searching before the cargo goes out. But we do it here on a random basis.
Mhm.
Okay, to answer your questions about the feast, thus far when we started this year to start random inspections, I have not charged anybody with any fees. I gave every one of them a warning because we have not been doing that for a while. So that warning is a way of educating the people about the law and about the regulations. So we confiscated the regulated species that we like deer and meat, and we give them to the Manamco. And we do have it's open. Our record is open for anyone who wants to see the the custodian transfer of custody of the documents and items. So they're open to anybody who wants to review that. So again, nothing stopping the conservation enforcement officers from doing search in ROTA, but we do it here only on a random basis.
Thank you for the clarification. Are you?
Thank you, Rep. Ogo. Rep. Manny.
Welcome, Secretary and your team for being here today. Um, the first question I have pertains to Parks and Recreation. Congratulations on your recent appointment, sir. How can we help Parks and Recreation put a stronger emphasis on its recreation side? So, for instance, community parks, community restrooms, pavilions, basketball courts, I mean, tennis courts, and other public recreational facilities. We do see the Parks and Rec guys out there, and they're working hard, mainly maintaining. But eventually, I think my colleagues and I would probably agree. We'd like to see more emphasis on the budget pertaining to the recreation side, because when there's a gap that falls on us, and there's only a limited amount of funds that we can do, but these facilities really need major overhauls. For example, the restroom at the marina, I don't know if that's under Parks and Rec, but the restroom in Lali 4 recently, Congressman John Paul and Rep Tinas, they put funds into revitalizing that. There's an unused restroom in Cagman, too. There's an unused restroom in Civic Center. These are facilities that really can not only help out the residents but tourists. There's a tennis court in Precinct 2 that hasn't been seen love since maybe the early 90s. Um, I don't think people know that it's a tennis court anymore because it's just flat. But given the economic situation at hand, more people, this is going to benefit our people if we have more facilities available for their recreation. So for those maybe that are out of a job, at least there's something to do. Not saying that's the solution, but for kids, instead of going into drugs, there's activities happening. When you go to the beach, you don't have to bother the private establishments to use the restroom because there's a restroom. Um, Growing up in the CNMI, I remember a time when we had good playgrounds, good facilities, and hopefully we can get back to that. So I know everyone's taking cuts, but Parks and Recreation, for example, is a worthy department that needs some love. If you travel, like let's say to other places, Palau, a lot of the fees goes into maintaining those. So I know Congressman Benaventi's been trying this toll booth. I think the word toll booth is not popular, but if you, for example, a Discover Saipan pass, let's say there's you know if you go to Korea, you buy a pass, you can visit all the historic sites and attractions, and it's a flat fee. If you go to Palau, you can pay for a permit, and it covers certain areas. So, in terms of being creative, I think this is one avenue that DLNR can look into, because what's happening here is you see all these laws, you have people doing the job, but the money that's collected is not going to the people that are doing the hard work, and we need to get back to that. Um, in terms of land registration, DLNR, I'm concerned because I've visited DLNR several times, and the condition of some of the documents there, the facility, it really needs some investment. Um, those are millions, even billions of dollars of assets and records that need to be preserved, because those are people's lives. Um, and sometimes the security is not up to par in comparison to the court, for example. Even the court needs some help, but even loss of one document can be a big loss to not only the government but families. So I hope that the administration puts some emphasis in investing in that unit, because it's really important. Um, this is probably more on the permitting side, but given the many capital improvement projects such as roads, sewer systems, and infrastructure, um, recently I was able to attend the infrastructure training in Hawaii, and there was so much federal money coming in to uh, to support infrastructure bills. And I see the concern with the administration, and I'm really glad that they're addressing the permitting issue. But is there a way we can instead of piecemealing the process? For example, if we already have existing roads, do we really need to have a permit every time we need to maintain it? I mean, the road's gonna be there for forever most of the time. Or if we need to mitigate, if we need to take credits, can we just look at the long term and see all the roads in Saipan that needs clearing, and if there's an endangered species, just already say that we need to take this much land from the conservation area or the credit bank and do it one shot instead of piecemealing, because these federal grants, they have a deadline. And if like they say, if you snooze, you lose. If you miss that boat, it's gonna go, and that's loss of opportunity. That's a cost that we're gonna eventually have to eat on the local side when the federal government is giving us money to take care of these issues. So, I give the department props for doing a lot given the very limited resources, but I believe there's a lot of opportunity for the department, and I look forward to working with you guys to help you. Uh, as they mentioned earlier, the team colleagues up here is you should be able to permugate and some of these rules. You might already have that ability, but the revenue generating side, not just collecting revenue, but collecting revenue and then putting it into these community projects. Because for example, pavilions, I know there's a permit for the pavilions, but then who's fixing it? It's the Lions Club or other agencies. But those fees need to eventually go back, and it shouldn't be have to be the burden of a lot of nonprofits. I mean, I know they're happy to do it, but there's always strings attached. You know. When you get it. But when the government does it, it's open. There's almost no strings. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rep. Castro, did you need a response from Parks and Rec?
Yeah, I
or-
know it's a multifaceted questions, but sure, if the directors from the different units can respond if there's any plan or anything in general. Thank you.
So, as it relates to the parks and the restrooms and things like that, we appreciate that you recognize our limitations. However, one of the things I wanted to do was give a shout out to Public Lands and MVA. We've developed partnerships where we are short in funding for equipments and materials and things. We partner with those agencies. As an example, the restroom at the marina, it will soon be uh, functional. It's been stagnant for I don't know how many years, and the thought of having hosting a fishing derby and then folks to use a porta potty when there's a facility over there that can be used. Um, we've partnered with MVA to get that thing up to par and change out some of the things inside. Um, as it relates to MARPI, we partner with Public Lands to provide us funding and fuel and operational stuff so we can help them maintain those sites. Uh, we recognize what we can and can't do, and so we're breaking down barriers and knocking on folks' doors to partner with them. Um, the mayor's office as well with adopt a pavilion and the program that he's got going on over there. Uh, we're working with all these folks. We do appreciate and look forward to the support for legislation for additional revenue generating types of actions. Uh, Sometimes it can be a little tricky when there's so many different jurisdictions involved, but we're happy to sit down at the table and talk through what can and can't be done. Um, the federal grants, we just applied several for lands and survey. We also recognize the importance of these documents. Uh, we put in for America the Beautiful. We're trying to reach out, and we understand again the limitation of our own economic situation, and so we're trying to be as creative as possible and not be too dependent on the local economy. Um, You mentioned about the current roads and some of the issues with permitting. We are in communication with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to try to figure out if we can do a blanket permit for all the existing roads, so that there is that balance between the species of interest and our own public safety and uh, needs. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Manny. And before we go to the second round, want to recognize our two new members for joining us, Representative Flores and TJ Manglonia. Did you have any questions, Isran? Just a couple of uh, clarif- clar- clarifying questions before I recognize Rep. Benaventi. With regards to the utilities and the cuts of 1.5 under the agriculture Department of Agriculture, I guess. Um, what is the most? Is it water billing from CUC that is budgeted here, or
I'll ask the Director of Agriculture to respond to that.
I think electricity that runs the pump 24/7, and we have like 5 pumps.
we're talking about 1.5 million dollars that was not included? That's not. I don't. I think that's more. I think that might be water charge, or maybe Miss Vicky can clarify that.
I'm just looking at that 1.5 and it seems, it's a huge amount. We have no funding allocated for any or others operations for any one of the agencies. And it's something that I think we need to revisit as far as like the amount. It's for five pumps for the year, 1.5 million, I believe, is a huge. And I don't have the actual billing for this. We can go back to the proposal and take a look at like what exactly, why was it requested at this high of an amount? Because I think even like the street lights were not even gonna cost us this much.
Right. Yeah, it just popped out at 1.5. I do understand majority of the utilities under the department is paid by grants. I know that there's over. I think I stopped counting at over 150,000 roughly, based on all the grants you have. It covers most of your operation, obviously, but what stands out the most is the agriculture sense. I'm assuming that would be water charges in the area. I'm not sure. This is the same as what CUC is charging CHCC. It's actually the water charge. It's not the power. So that needs to be clarified. I think maybe if there is a billing that we can see, that's something I'll note down. It's quite a huge number. And like I said, I do understand the cuts on the operation, because majority of the operation is covered by the grants that is under DLNR, and that's also it's been the highest that I've seen so far at $9 million. So you guys have a whole lot of grants that pays for a lot, including personnel, salaries. I did notice there is a grant under the joint enforcement agreement for to construct the building. So is that something that's in the plans, or I did notice there's an amount here, or is that a renovation? Is that anyone?
That funding was returned to the renting agency primarily because we were unable to secure a public lands to build that building. And by the time we were able, we secured the public lands. It's already the grantor has requested the funding to be returned.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I did notice there was a lot of building, maybe it's renovation, I'm not sure. But that's something that we need to look at, and I guess get with the grants office to find out, how we can do, what we can do to, I guess, apply for it back. And that's all I have for now. I'll recognize now Representative Benaventi for the second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a point of clarification with regards to the secretary and the LNR. with regards to what Representative Manny has mentioned. What he's alluding is a state of the art type approach of trying to do a revenue generating as far as from the uh, outside of the Commonwealth, you know, and coming into the Commonwealth, we would be receiving the proceeds of that. But I don't know how much of a challenge that is. But as of now, really, as of now, the way we're looking at it and the way I'm more or less looking at it is that the reason why I introduced a bill to for revenue generating of the tourists that are coming in, which is basically only $5 per passengers that comes in the island, and that might sound small amount, but as the tourists multiply, it will, it will generate more. And the reason that the toll gate was included in there, was inclusive within the bill, is that for the safety purposes of the tourists. When the tourist comes in, as many of you has realized before in the past that we had tourists that are being vandalized, being harassed, being all kinds of stuff, especially over towards Marpi. So the only reason for the toll gate is to assure the safety and assure that these people would pay what they need to pay, because with the proceeds of the money would allow uh, Parks and Recreation to maintain the facility, the LNR, to maintain the facility, cut the grass, have contracts to fix the facilities like the bathrooms in Banzai Cliff or Suicide Cliff and the grottos, all those areas really, the Calavera Cave. So the intent of this bill was to really establish one toll gate and next to Calavera Cave to capture those people that are coming in from the back, and then there's one gate that will be closed probably by the Korean shrine or the Korean monument. No, so with that said, I think it will alleviate the problems over there, and it will control the safety. We would get assurance from our tourists, that the tour agency that the tourists are protected, and that's the most important. I think we have to, in order for us to be, instead of just a blanket type approach, it's better to really show these people that we are serious in what we do. And in order for us to keep up with what we do, to continue, we have to continue working hard for this. And this is a revenue generating bill. It could, it could be even in the law to be put in as a regulation to for the Parks and Recreation to be inclusive in the regulation. So it will be really mandated that they will follow the such provisions. But I think that the shortfall of this and the problems that we're having with this secretary is that there is there's a pull and shelf type situation with DPL. DPL is actually controlling the funding, but I feel, and I'm glad that you mentioned that you've been collaborating with them. If there's a MOA or MOU that can be established, and linked together between DLNR and uh, DPL, I think we could come to an amicable solution. And with that said, I think this thing might work, but I think the effort also has to come from your office. So there should be a collaboration between us and your office and DPL in order for us to move ahead with this. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Are we discussing your bill right now or a different one?
I'm not discussing my view
Oh,
basically,
yeah, just making sure.
but I was alluding to the discussion prior. I was alluding to the discussion prior, and I just like to say that the reason for the toll gate is for the safety.
Oh, okay.
Basically, that's
Thank you
what
for
it
that
is.
clarification. Just making
We're
sure.
not trafficking. Thank you.
Rep Ogo, then Rep Angelo.
Thank you, Chair. So, just out of curiosity, this question is for Mr. Ogumoro. You mentioned that the water pumps run 24/7, correct? So, there are some farmers that are concerned because, they don't get water 24/7. Besides, conserving water, is there a way that the pump will be turned off to conserve electricity?
Thank you for your question. That's something that we are also doing, turning off the pumps uh, intermittently. As an example, today we turn off the pumps that provide water to the farm plots in the lower ground, and then tomorrow we turn them back on so that there will be water for them, and also the folks in the higher ground will not have water, and then next day they'll have water. So we kind of like uh, uh, provide water on a rotational basis.
Okay, so it's not 24/7, correct? It's
well,
intermittent.
Well, they are, because there are three pumps uh, that supply that we utilize to supply water for the lower grounds,
Oh.
and there are two pumps that we
So you
utilize
switch
to
them in between.
yeah.
Okay.
So right,
Okay, thank you.
and that is the electricity, the cost of electricity. The water, we do not pay for the water. That
Mhm.
water is ours.
Mhm.
We have our own. We pump our
I
own
see.
water,
Mhm.
not CUC water. But the power that powers the water pump at all five wells, that's the bulk of that $1 million that we're trying to pay off, plus maintain uh, power in the coming days.
All right, thank you for the clarification. Are you?
Thank you, Rep Ogo. Rep Angelo.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, DLNR team. Um, I don't think this is going to be a question, but rather more of like a statement, if you will. But I know we keep emphasizing the economy, you know, and your department is recognized as one of the major permitting agencies. We've had several budget hearings already, and a couple agencies had mentioned permitting. You know, these are potential revenue generating. You know, it, it's going to benefit the CNMI. Uh, I've been just trying to think of how we can mitigate these issues. Or I'm not going to sit down here and act like I know, the ins and out of the fish and wildlife side. You guys are the professionals, and I know you guys know way better and have way more information than we do. But our committee on natural resources stand ready to assist in any way we can. It's just a matter of the collaboration and communication. So as Congressman BJ Atta mentioned, like you guys could possibly be like a somewhat self-sustaining agency. I strongly believe in that. And there's even with the CDGDBR program, right? There's a lot of pending um, applications sitting in your office, and these contractors obviously they pay taxes, so these are stuff that will contribute to the community. And I just received, our office received several calls actually regarding it's always usually regarding permits. So I really believe that we need to sit down together and try to discuss these issues
at hand so that we can find solutions. We need to break out of our bubbles and be innovative and creative and see how we can move forward and with a smooth process. So I do apologize, and I just had to throw it out there. So I know this is a budget hearing, but it involves revenue as well. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Rep Angelo. Rep Mangloya.
Hi, thank you, Chairman, and good morning, Secretary. Thank you so much, and team. Not so much a question, but I just want to commend you guys on the fact that you are trying to collaborate with other agencies. I think now, especially with the financial crisis that's going on, we need to all collaborate across the board with all agencies and break down those barriers. And like Rep Camacho said, break out of our bubbles. And we're here to assist. Like you said, you guys do have the potential to raise more revenue via permitting. I think it's just a matter of the processing part. How can we streamline the processing so that way, projects aren't sitting as long as they are? And I know that obviously you're new to the appointment and you're still getting the hang of everything that's going on. But I like to commend you guys for at least doing that and reaching across to other agencies to work together. That's great to hear that you're working with MBA and DPO, and it's not so much a territory thing anymore. It's like, how can we work together to help our people for the betterment? So yeah, I just wanted to commend you guys for that, and our doors are open, and we're here to assist in any way we can to help streamline all processes across the board. I think it's time that we look at some of these fees and these permitting processes and update them so that way we can move into 2023. It's about time. So thank you guys again for your hard work, and I appreciate all the work that you guys do. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep Mangloya. Vice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up with the Vice Speaker's question regarding Parks and Recreation. You mentioned that 50% is going to be paid for by the Department of Public Lands. Correct.
Yes.
And so one of the line item veto messages in the 2023 revised budget was that the certain employees under SIPA and DLNR Parks and Recreation is being paid by DPO because of the north side, which is Marianas Resort. That was the reason why it was line item veto to include Rhoda and Tinian. So the department considering to include Rhoda and Tinian Parks and Recreation on the 50% payment by DPL.
Was that a question?
Yes. it's a
Are we
question.
considering including Rhoda and Tinian?
Including Rhoda and Tinian, because the line item veto message for 2023's revised budget, they remove Rhoda and Tinian from the payment from DPL paying the Parks and Rec employees because for the reason that they were attending to the Marianas Resort. I guess OMB.
Thank you for that question, Vice Chair. So in the MOU, it was never mentioned about Rota and Tinian, and that's why it was excluded. It was line item veto. So what needs to happen is an amendment to the MOU to include Rota and Tinian as well.
Okay, would that be in this process so that we make sure that the Rhoda and Tinian, we don't have to amend the budget to include Rhoda and Tinian in this process, because right now you have every single employee under DLNR Parks and Rec on SIPAD 50-50. And they're not attending to the Marianas Resort, that's for sure, right? You got your shop people are also 50% DLNR and 50% DPL. So wouldn't it make sense that 50% of and this would actually help you guys at DLNR. This will free up 50% of their salaries that you guys are paying from the department to the Rhoda and Tinian employees. I believe that that's something that you guys should sit and consider into that payment so that it'll free up some money for you guys, whether it's for operational costs or enforcement.
No, I have no objection to that.
Thank you.
I have one comment, perhaps maybe a provision in the budget, when it's drafted to also, um, I don't want to say force the issue, but in the budget to include that, DPL also provides funding to Rotantinian at least up to 50%.
And we did exactly that in the revised budget, but it was line item veto for the fact the argument was that Saipan Parks and Rec employees were attending to Mariana's Resort. Well, it's obvious right now in this budget that not all Saipan Parks and Rec employees are attending to Mariana's Resort. You're including the shop people, the grounds maintenance for whatever. There's a lot of other positions that are included in the 50%. I'm just thinking this would actually help DLNR's funding source so that they can actually move monies to where they see more fit. And I think that that's important to work out with DPL because the revised budgets are already an example of enforcing DPL to pay 50% or whatever the amount was for the current fiscal year. That was line item veto, and the argument was because of Mariana's Resort.
The so we have limited personnel, right? And the breadth of our scope, the responsibility is pretty huge. Just because someone's uh, personnel description or position description is in the shop doesn't mean they're in the shop 100% of the time. So it's all men on deck. Uh, we roll out everybody who is even the mechanics and folks within the shop are out there uh, doing doing the maintenance work on all the parks, including the resorts. So
Mr. Secretary, I do understand that you definitely need more manpower to address all the issues that the scene with the department. But like I said, the revised budget's argument was based on Mariana's Resort itself. That's the reason why Road and Tinian wasn't included. But this is now we have this opportunity to fix it so that DLNR can have some extra funds to address their more pressing needs. If we're gonna take away 50% of the cost from, or I guess in this case might be 40%, right? Because of the austerity. But if you take 40% of just I don't know how many employees are there on Road and Tinian that will be under the Parks and Rec division, but it'll help DLNR. I'm trying to find money for you guys to be more flexible with. If that's something that I believe you should consider sitting on the table with DPL and include those employees. I'm sure the new director, he got spoiled at the Saipa mayor's office with all the manpower, but I would appreciate that, something to consider. And to follow up, I see a lot of other positions here under DLNR that says they're vacant right now, but they're placed at 50%. If DLNR was to hire to fill these positions, they would be contradictory to our minimum wage statutes. How are we going to address that from your standpoint?
Thank you, Chair, for that question. So the 50%, although it brings it down to less than the minimum wage, the other 50% would be covered by DPL if they were hired. Right now, because the position is vacant and everybody else, whether the FTE is filled or not, everyone else is funded at 50%, and that other 50% would be covered by DPL. So if they do get hired, their 50% would be covered by the general fund, and the other 50% will be covered by DPL.
Thank you for that. My apologies. I wasn't more specific, but this is outside of Parks and Recreation. You have a lot of employees that are vacant positions, but they're only budgeted at 50%, and they wouldn't meet the minimum wage. One of the examples would be the Fish and Wildlife Division. You have two, four, six vacancies at roughly $12,000 or $11,000 annually. That obviously doesn't meet the minimum wage. We are not going to be able to hire because it'd be an illegal hire, right? Unless you're doing part-time jobs. Uh, is that
Okay,
something?
I just want to go back and clarify that. So if they are going to hire and they're going to use the, the WIOA funds, then that would cover their first 6 months, and then the other 6 months would be covered by at so the first 6 months that they're hired and they're utilizing the funding through a federal program, that would cover them 100%. So the other 50% would be through the through the general fund, and perhaps potentially a federal program through the Fish and Wildlife can cover the other 50%.
Okay, so that's why it's budgeted at 50%. Like the conservation officers, they can qualify for federal funds.
If the FTE that's used is through the WIA program, then they would be covered 100%. But the 50% following that, how the program works is after 6 months that you're hired, the hiring agency would cover them at, the next 6 months. And then the next 6 months would be the 50% covered by the general fund, and potentially, Fish and Wildlife through a federal program can cover their other 50%.
Okay, so I guess the position is we're hoping that we're working with the WIA on this so that come October 1st, the first 6 months will be addressed by WIA, and then the remainder of the fiscal year will be addressed. I'm just worried, right? Because these positions will become civil service position after a certain period. And where the effects is going to happen is in the next fiscal year, they become full blown employees and we're charging at, or we're obligating at 50%. We might have a bigger issue in 2025 because we can't afford them now. And they become civil service employees. Those are additional cases that the civil service doesn't need. But okay, I can see now where we're working with WIA to address these positions. But I guess this is something to start considering down the road because we might actually end up locking ourselves. Right? Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the Secretary wants to, thank you.
Sure, and yes, you're correct. We're also going to leverage federal funds. Currently, we have and enforcement officers are also eligible to be federally funded. We can put some folks on core reef funding like we did previously when I was there. There is joint enforcement funding. We have also SFF. It's just a matter of time before these things get activated, and we're just working the process. But it was critical that, well, at least we have something in those positions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. In addition to that, I mean, you guys know your departments way better than we're ever gonna ever understand it, right? Are there any other positions that are locally funded that can be transferred that we can actually get from you guys' office prior to passing this budget so that we can address that before we start working on the actual budget? If there are other positions within the LNR that can be, but maybe if it's percentage, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 50%, 80% can be addressed by a federal grant that you guys currently are on or are applying for, that we can start fixing in the budget process before we actually pass the budget, so that we don't we don't go in 2025's budget and they're like everybody's going to look at the budget, it's going to seem that somebody's getting paid twice. We kind of had this issue with DPW where it almost seems like an individual is being paid by the federal side and the local side. uh, Maybe something to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. There is potential for that, and we'll circle back to you once we identify folks that can be transferred over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I yield my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Is there anyone? Good. Thank you, Secretary, for being here this morning, clarifying some of the questions that the members have. I will now invite you to your closing remarks.
Uh, the department is successful solely because of all the hardworking folks within the divisions that come in and day out, whatever the conditions are. I want to thank them and the members of this team for continuing the hard work um, and lending me their support as I try to envision a better DLNR for CNMI. And I thank you all for the opportunity to sit here and provide information uh, to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary. And just last note before we leave, just the clarifying question with regards to those pumps. I guess OMB can again look into that, and so that we can see what really is the cost and why was the amount submitted to OMB. Just to clarify, we might have to go back and maybe contest, or there might be some issue, water tapping going on back there to be 1.5 million. But uh, I'll invite the precinct five to members to go back there and look at what's going on. But with that, members, thank you. I'll now adjourn this meeting on today. Thank you all for making time today on this hearing. Thank you again, and we'll be back at 1 p.m. today for Department of Labor. Thank you, and I'll move to adjourn this meeting. Thank.